My name is Emily, and at 26, I'm a driven career woman. Currently, I share a home with my husband, John. Lately, I've been contemplating starting a family soon, but John believes we should first focus on building a house and settling down before considering children. Therefore, we're diligently saving money for our future home. Despite my desire to start a family promptly, John remains adamant about his stance. Whenever I broach the topic of children, he reiterates the need to establish our home first. It's disheartening how he disregards my perspective. I resign myself to the idea that I must work harder to contribute to our savings. John and I have been married for a year now, and I've noticed a pattern in our relationship. He rarely considers my opinions, a trait that persisted from our dating days. Initially, I admired his strong convictions, but in marriage, mutual respect for each other's viewpoints is essential. I fear our marriage is faltering, especially with the influence of his parents who live just a short drive away. John frequently visits his parents, citing reasons like cutting down on expenses. However, I've discovered he indulges in drinks with his coworkers, conveniently omitting these expenses from his frugal calculations. It's perplexing how stringent he is with me about saving yet being lenient with himself. His frugality extends to trivial matters like conserving hot water and turning off lights prematurely, directives he imposes solely on me. If only he extended the same standards to himself, perhaps our relationship wouldn't feel so one-sided. I would be seething with anger. However, he seems to believe it's acceptable to impose his ideas on others. Every week when we visit his parents' house, a new problem surfaces. Hasn't it been a year since you got married? We want some good news soon. We'll be able to see our grandchild, exclaims both my in-laws, putting immense pressure on me. Glancing at John sitting beside me, I can tell he's glaring disapprovingly. It's evident he wants to say, "Don't say unnecessary things." While I share the desire for a child, John insists on building our own home first. It's entirely inappropriate for my in-laws to pressure me to have a child in this situation. Rather than advising John, who doesn't listen to my words at all regarding having children, my in-laws persist in pressuring me. Despite wanting to speak up, I'm silenced by their constant pressure for a grandchild. After the meal, John announces, "I'm going out for a smoke." "You know, Emily, it seems like you're working, but if you want to be a housewife, you should quit your job and work hard to be a good wife. Maybe that's why John isn't paying attention to you." It feels as though I'm being told I can't have children because I'm working, despite my strong desire for children. John is the one not thinking about having them anytime soon. "Just quit your job already," urges my in-law. I retort, "It was John who asked me to work. Why don't you talk to John first before constantly lecturing me?" Expressing my anger, I continue, "When it comes to having children, I want them to. But it's John who stubbornly refuses to listen to me until we have our own home. Instead of nagging at me, why don't you make sure you tell your son the truth?" My words leave my in-laws in a state of shock. I excuse myself with a simple apology and leave the table, making my way towards the entrance. The anger within me extended to John, who leisurely smoked by the entrance without saying a word. I climbed into the car, and Annie followed suit, casually remarking, "Hey, are you leaving already?" Knowing he would never disclose the truth to his parents, I grew weary of the various things my in-laws constantly told me. I declared that I wouldn't be visiting my in-laws' house anymore, and John widened his eyes in surprise. "Why not? We can save on food expenses, right? You also want a home soon and children, don't you?" he questioned. Fed up with the continuous impositions from both him and my in-laws, I snapped back, "If it's about saving, I've told you many times that we would save more if you stopped going to drinking parties or smoking instead of driving to your parents' house just to save the cost of one meal. Why don't you save in that way? Everyone needs a break. Expressing my frustration, I continued, You keep imposing things on me like not using hot water and turning off the lights by 10 p.m. You think we can save money without sacrificing anything. If I have to go through all this trouble alone, then I don't need a home. I'm fed up with this. You never sacrifice anything yourself, but you're okay with imposing it on others. He seemed to downplay the situation, saying, It's not a big deal. But I countered, No, it is a big deal. How much patience do you think I've had all this time? Moreover, I was infuriated by his pretense in front of his parents, making it appear as if I were the reason we couldn't have grandchildren. I'm tired of being the only one asked to have grandchildren. It's not me who doesn't want children. It's John. I've been saying it for a long time. I want children soon, so please stop being so angry. Seeing John struggle to deal with my unusual anger brought a slight sense of satisfaction, but it didn't resolve everything. Unsure of what to do next, I gazed out of the car window, ignoring John. A turning point for us came a month later when one of my relatives, my father's brother, passed away. With several pieces of land, a luxurious mansion, and a lavish lifestyle, my uncle's passing became a revelation for John. Impressive. I didn't know you had such a remarkable relative, he remarked. A few days later, upon receiving news about my uncle's inheritance, I decided to discuss the details with the lawyer in our apartment. Recognizing that it was a matter exclusively related to me and had no bearing on John, I politely asked him to leave the room, especially since he seemed uneasy about the concept of inheritance. I wanted to spare him any potential trouble that could arise if he got involved. After about 3 hours of listening to the lawyer explain the intricacies of the inheritance, I thanked him and asked him to leave. However, to my surprise, John, who had been at home earlier, was nowhere to be found. Assuming he had probably stepped out to avoid interrupting my conversation with the lawyer, I started preparing dinner. Little did I know, 3 months later, John approached me expressing, "There's something I want to show you," and took me for a drive. Excitement welled up as we entered a residential area, but my confusion grew when the car parked in front of a certain house. John then pressed the intercom, and my in-laws emerged from inside. However, it was evident that this house was not their home. "You finally made it. When are you and Emily moving over here?" "We're thinking of moving in by the end of this month," announced my father-in-law. He continued, blaming me for being a selfish daughter-in-law, and accused me of always shifting the responsibility for having children onto John. I shot a disapproving glare at John, bewildered as to why he brought me here when I had clearly stated I wouldn't visit my in-laws anymore. Searching for an explanation, I questioned him, and he simply shrugged, stating, "Don't get so angry. If we live together, we can bridge the gap between you and my mom. Besides, this will be our new home from now on, so you should cooperate on the children issue as well." His revelation left me in disbelief. I hadn't agreed to living with them, especially after explicitly stating that I wouldn't go to my in-laws' house anymore. The situation was further complicated by the nature of the house, as John disclosed it's a two-family house. My plan was always for us to live with my parents eventually. "So what's the problem with living in a two-family house now?" he asked. The question lingered in the air as I mulled over the situation. Living in a two-family house seemed to be a significant issue, especially when considering our savings. According to our financial situation, building such a splendid new house was seemingly impossible. I couldn't fathom how John managed it. "My dad and I chipped in the money, so our savings are empty. But it's fine, right?" John casually mentioned. His nonchalant attitude perplexed me. He continued, "I heard your uncle's inheritance was worth $690,000, so if you use that money to repay us for the cost of the two-family house, It should be fine, huh? I was taken aback. The idea that he believed my inheritance should be used to fund the house without my consent baffled me. Even if I were to inherit the money, how I used it should be my decision, not his. Frustrated by my rejection of their proposal, John reached into his bag and pulled out a pre-filled divorce form with his name on it. "Your money is our money. If you don't like living together, let's get a divorce," he declared. I took the divorce form from his hand, expressing, "Fine, if living together is the alternative, then divorce is the better choice," firmly placing the divorce form into my bag. I turned my back on him and my in-laws, who looked stunned. Ignoring their reactions, I continued. "By the way, I renounced my uncle's inheritance." John froze with a bewildered expression. Without waiting for a response, I took a bus and headed home to our apartment. Upon arrival, I promptly filled in my name on the divorce form, which already had John's name on it. I then submitted the divorce papers and immediately purchased cardboard boxes at a home improvement store to start preparing for the move. Recognizing that I couldn't handle the move alone, I hired a moving company. Fortunately, it turned out that not many moves were happening during this season, allowing for a quick relocation. As I packed for the move, a commotion outside the front door indicated John's return. I had the chain lock on, and I addressed him. "Sorry, I had the chain lock on. I don't know what you might do when you're so angry. Besides, I need to finish packing for the move. Could you stay at your parents' house for a few days?" "I won't accept a divorce," John declared, widening my eyes in surprise. I reminded him, "But you handed me the divorce form, didn't you?" "If you sign the divorce papers, that means you agree to the divorce, you know." Astonished, I questioned whether he truly understood the implications of what he had done. He frowned, appearing frustrated, but quickly changed the subject. "Why would you give up on a $690,000 inheritance?" "Normally, you'd inherit it," he questioned. It seemed he had overheard some details about the inheritance, but hadn't grasped the full story. Likely after learning about the $690,000 inheritance, he had rushed to my in-laws, and they impulsively purchased the two-family house without considering the consequences. I explained the inheritance discussion came to me because there wasn't anyone else to inherit it. My uncle had 3 sons, 2 daughters, a wife, and grandchildren. However, all of them renounced the inheritance, so it ended up coming to me. My uncle did have $690,000, but he had to demolish his mansion, spend a lot on maintaining his land, and had plenty of debt. I realized that renouncing the inheritance was a better choice than inheriting it. John was in disbelief, exclaiming, "No way. So even if you had inherited $690,000, you're saying there wouldn't have been much money left? That's fraud." I explained that the lawyer and I had a proper discussion about it, but someone had eavesdropped and left before hearing the whole story. My words left him speechless, and perhaps he finally realized he was in the wrong. However, I asserted, "It's too late now. You betrayed my trust. We've already filed for divorce, and you and I are no longer a couple. Why are you subtly saying you don't want to divorce now? If you truly didn't want to divorce, you should have followed me right away when I returned, shouldn't you?" I reminded him of the consequences of his actions, emphasizing that his mother's opinion about the divorce didn't change the fact that he and his father had invested in the two-family house. His mother's lack of experience with work didn't allow her to fully appreciate the value of money. I sighed, realizing it wasn't my role to listen to his complaints about his parents. If we were still a married couple, I might have entertained the conversation. However, I reminded him, "You haven't submitted the divorce papers yet, have you?" He pleaded, "If you do it now, we can still be a couple. Please let's live together in that two-family house." "I'd already submitted the divorce papers, so it's pointless now," I replied. His expression slumped in front of the apartment door, appearing bewildered and lost. While I believed he brought this upon himself, I couldn't let him linger outside forever. Briefly considering sending him away, I realized I had no time to waste. So I continued with my preparations for the move. After a while he was gone, and I proceeded with the move, informing my workplace about the divorce, especially since my boss had acted as our mediator. Feeling obligated to apologize for the divorce, I'd also shared the news with my coworkers who had been invited to our wedding. During lunch break, unexpectedly, he burst into my department in front of my coworkers, claiming, "It's absurd that you're talking about the divorce. I wish you hadn't mentioned it." He disclosed the situation in his department, assuming I had inherited an estate and suggested buying a two-family house. When faced with the choice between divorce or living together, I chose divorce. Consequently, he found himself being avoided by everyone. I even received sympathy from colleagues. Eventually, he quit his job. During this time, a male colleague confessed to me, saying, "I've actually liked you for a long time. I hope to build a home where we can communicate as a couple and work things out together."
At 3:47 p.m., I missed the first call. The second came at 3:52. By the third, my heart was pounding. I was in the middle of an important client meeting in Chicago when my daughter Emma's number kept appearing on my phone. Something felt wrong. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway, my hands shaking as I called back. But it wasn't Emma who answered, it was my mother. Her voice was weak, almost broken. "Olivia," she said, "something happened while you were away." My sister Lisa had been watching Emma while I was on this business trip. It was supposed to be simple. Emma would stay with my parents and Lisa would help out. We'd done this many times before. "What happened?" I asked, my mind racing. My mother hesitated before explaining. Lisa and Emma had argued. Lisa claimed Emma was being disrespectful. And then something I could barely believe. Lisa had kicked my 12-year-old daughter out of the house. "Kicked out?" I repeated, stunned. Lisa had driven Emma to a community center, dropped her off, and told her to call me. Emma was left alone, scared, with nowhere to go. "Where is she now?" I demanded. "A social worker found her," my mother said. "She's safe, but Lisa says." I cut her off. "Put Emma on the phone." When Emma spoke, her voice was quiet but steady. "I didn't do anything wrong, Mom," she said. Lisa got mad because I didn't want to help her clean her closet. She called me lazy and disrespectful. That didn't make sense. Emma was always responsible, always helpful. Something wasn't right. I needed to get home. Now. Without hesitation, I canceled the rest of my meetings. My boss didn't argue. He could tell this was serious. The flight home felt endless. Every second, I imagined my daughter alone and afraid. Lisa and I had never been close, but this was beyond anything I expected. Lisa had always been jealous, never outright, but in small ways. She resented my career, my independence, and most of all, my close bond with Emma. She had struggled in life while I had built stability for myself and my daughter. But abandoning a child, that was something I couldn't forgive. When I landed, I called the social worker, Margaret. Her voice was calm. "Emma is okay," she said. "She's strong, but she's hurt. She doesn't understand why her aunt did this." But I did. Lisa had always made little comments about my parenting, saying I was too soft. But this wasn't just words. This was cruelty. When I arrived at my parents' house, I saw Emma sitting quietly in the living room. She looked so small. I turned to my mother. "Tell me everything," I said firmly. As Emma started to talk, I realized this wasn't just about one argument. This was about family, boundaries, and what I refused to allow. Lisa had made a terrible mistake, and she was about to find out exactly what that meant. The living room felt charged with unspoken tension as Emma recounted her version of events. Her voice was steady, but I could see the hurt behind her eyes, the same look she'd get when someone had disappointed her deeply. "Aunt Lisa came over early that morning," Emma began. "She was reorganizing the closet in the guest room and asked me to help. I was doing my homework, but I told her I'd help after I finished my math assignment. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her chair. I could tell she was struggling with the guilt of having allowed this to happen. She got angry, Emma continued, said I was lazy and disrespectful. But I wasn't. I always help when someone asks me. She started saying mean things about how I'm spoiled, how I never do anything for anyone. The more Emma spoke, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't about a closet or chores. This was about Lisa's long-standing resentment toward me now being projected onto my daughter. She told me to leave, Emma said quietly, said if I wasn't going to help, I wasn't welcome in the house. My mind was already 3 steps ahead. This wasn't just a moment of frustration. This was calculated emotional manipulation. I pulled out my phone and started recording our conversation. Emma looked at me, a question in her eyes. Just in case, I whispered. Later that evening, after Emma was asleep, I made a series of calls. The first was to a family law attorney. The second was to my company's HR department. The third was to my sister's employer. Lisa worked as a middle management supervisor at a local marketing firm. She'd always been jealous of my career, constantly comparing herself to me. Now that comparison would cost her. The next morning, Lisa arrived at my parents' house, clearly expecting to explain herself. What she didn't expect was me waiting for her. "We need to talk," I said, my voice calm but razor-sharp. Her confident swagger faltered. "About what?" "About you abandoning a 12-year-old child. About your behavior. About the fact that what you did is considered child endangerment." Lisa laughed, but it was a nervous sound. "You're overreacting. Emma was fine, the social worker. The social worker who found a minor alone and scared. The one who filed an official report." I watched the color drain from her face. I had documentation, statements from Emma, the social worker's report, text messages Lisa had sent revealing her pattern of behavior. "I've been gathering evidence, building a case. I've spoken with your employer," I continued. "They take a very dim view of employees who engage in child endangerment, especially those in management positions." Lisa's bravado crumbled. "You wouldn't." Watch me. The next few weeks were a strategic dismantling of Lisa's life. Not out of vengeance, but out of a clear message. Actions have consequences. Her employer launched an internal investigation. The family law attorney advised me on potential legal actions. I wasn't just protecting Emma. I was creating a barrier that would prevent Lisa from ever putting my daughter in danger again. What Lisa didn't understand was that this wasn't about punishment. This was about establishing boundaries, about showing Emma that she was valued, protected, and never to be treated as disposable. Emma was resilient. She threw herself into her studies, into her art, into our relationship. But I could see the impact of Lisa's actions. The slight hesitation when family gatherings were mentioned. The way she'd sometimes look uncertain when adults were discussing something. My parents were caught in the middle. They loved both their daughters, but they couldn't ignore the severity of Lisa's actions. "She needs help," my mother said during one of our conversations. "Professional help." I agreed, but help couldn't come at the expense of Emma's safety or emotional well-being. The turning point came unexpectedly. A letter from Lisa's therapist, recommended by her employer as part of her mandatory counseling after the investigation. I recognize now the pattern of behavior I've exhibited. The letter read, summarizing Lisa's therapeutic insights. My jealousy toward my sister, my resentment of her success, my inability to process my own failures, these were projected onto her child. It wasn't an apology. Not yet. But it was acknowledgement, a first step. Emma read the letter with me. Her response was simple but profound. "People can change, right, Mom?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said, "but change requires genuine effort and accountability." As we sat together, I realized this wasn't just about protecting Emma from Lisa. This was about teaching Emma how to set healthy boundaries, how to stand up for herself, how to love someone while also holding them accountable. The journey was far from over, but we were taking it together. To be continued. Would you like me to elaborate on any part of this segment? I focused on the aftermath of the betrayal, the strategic response, and the emotional journey of both mother and daughter. 6 months after the incident, our lives had settled into a new rhythm. Emma had joined a youth leadership program, her confidence growing with each passing week. The experience of standing up to her aunt had transformed her in ways I hadn't anticipated. One Saturday morning, an unexpected invitation arrived. A letter from Lisa requesting a meeting at a local coffee shop. Emma discovered it first, bringing it to me with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Do you want to go?" I asked her, giving her complete control of the decision. She thought for a moment. "Yes," Emma said finally. "I want to hear what she has to say." The coffee shop was neutral ground. I watched carefully as Lisa approached our table, her usual bravado replaced by a nervous energy. She looked smaller somehow, less intimidating. "Hi," she said quietly, her eyes first meeting Emma's, then mine. Emma spoke first, a trait she'd inherited from me. Direct, unafraid. "Why did you do what you did?" Lisa's hands trembled around her coffee cup. "I was jealous," she admitted. "Of your mom's success. Of how close you two are. I felt like I was always falling short." The raw honesty was unexpected. Emma listened, her face a careful mask of neutrality. "Jealousy isn't an excuse for hurting a child," Emma said. The words were mine, but spoken in her voice. I watched the conversation unfold, ready to intervene but allowing Emma her moment. This was her healing, her confrontation. Lisa's therapy had clearly made an impact. She didn't argue, didn't make excuses. She listened. "I'm trying to be better," Lisa said finally, "not just for you, but for myself." Emma looked at me, a silent conversation passing between us. I saw the moment she made her decision. "I accept your apology," she said, "but trust takes time." The weeks following that meeting were transformative. Lisa began making genuine efforts, small gestures, birthday cards, occasional texts checking on Emma's school projects. No grand declarations, just consistent, quiet attempts to rebuild. My parents watched carefully. They'd been torn during the initial conflict, now cautiously hopeful. At Emma's year-end school presentation, an unexpected guest arrived. Lisa, sitting quietly in the back, watching with pride. Emma noticed her, paused mid-presentation, then continued, a small smile playing on her lips. Later, she told me, "I want her to be part of my life, but on my terms." The legal consequences for Lisa were significant but not destructive. A formal warning from her company, mandatory counseling, and a clear understanding that such behavior would never be tolerated again. What started as a moment of betrayal had become a lesson in accountability, healing, and the complex nature of family relationships. Emma's resilience amazed me. She didn't just survive the experience, she grew from it. The youth leadership program recognized her for a special award, celebrating her courage and emotional intelligence. "Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is set a boundary," her program director told her during the ceremony. As I watched my daughter accept her award, I realized we had transformed a moment of potential trauma into a powerful story of growth. Lisa wasn't completely forgiven, but she was given a chance, a carefully monitored, conditional chance to be part of our lives. Family isn't about perfect relationships, I told Emma later that evening. It's about respect, accountability, and the willingness to grow. She hugged me tight. "We did this together," she whispered. And we had. The journey wasn't over, but we had found our way forward, together, stronger, unbroken. Would you like me to elaborate on any part of this final segment? I focused on resolution, healing, and the complex path to rebuilding trust within a family. One crisp autumn morning, just as I was getting ready for a client meeting, my phone rang. I answered calmly, but the moment I heard my mother's voice, I knew something was wrong. "Michael," she said carefully, "we need to talk about the house." My stomach tightened. This wasn't just any house, it was our family home, passed down for generations. I had spent my childhood there, baking apple pies with my grandmother, learning woodworking from my grandfather. That house was part of our history. "What about the house?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She hesitated, then the truth came out in a rush. My father's gambling had finally caught up with us. His debts had spiraled out of control, and in desperation, they had sold the one thing that was never meant to be touched, our home. "We had no choice," she said, her voice breaking. "The debt collectors were after us. Your father swore this would be the last time." I had heard that promise too many times before. My grandmother had left the house to me in her will, making it clear that it should stay in the family. But now, without even telling me, my parents had sold it. "How much?" I asked, my voice ice cold. The number she gave me made my blood freeze. They had sold it for far less than it was worth. And worse, the buyer was a real estate developer with ties to the casino owner. It wasn't just a bad decision, it was a scam. I spent the next few hours digging for information. As a forensic accountant, I knew how to find hidden truths. I called old family friends, checked property records, and spoke to my father's business contacts. The deeper I looked, the worse it got. My father had borrowed from everyone: friends, family, loan sharks. The debts were endless. But what hurt most was how easily they had let go of our family's legacy. I remembered my grandmother's words. Family isn't just about blood. It's about honor. About protecting what matters. By the end of the day, I had everything I needed. Bank records, loan agreements, property documents, every detail lined up, exposing a web of corruption. My parents thought I would be helpless. They were wrong. I stared at the file in front of me, already forming a plan. This wasn't just about getting the house back. It was about bringing down the people who had profited from my father's addiction: the casino, the developers, the loan sharks. As the sun set, I made my first call to a lawyer who specialized in financial crime. "I need your help," I said. "We're going to take them all down." The fight had just begun. The next 6 weeks became a masterclass in strategic preparation. My forensic accounting skills, typically used to unravel complex financial fraud for corporate clients, were now laser-focused on my personal mission. I discovered the real estate developer, Marcus Reynolds, wasn't just a random buyer. He was deeply connected with the local casino's ownership group. The house sale was part of a larger pattern of predatory practices targeting families with gambling-addicted members. My first move was subtle. I began gathering comprehensive documentation, not just about the house sale, but about every transaction, every loan, every suspicious financial movement connected to the casino and the developer. Laura, my contact at the state's financial crimes unit, became an unexpected ally. "This goes deeper than just your family's case," she told me during our third meeting. Her preliminary investigation revealed a systematic exploitation scheme targeting vulnerable families. "They've been doing this for years," Laura explained, spreading documents across the conference room table. "Gambling addicts get deep into debt, then these developers swoop in and purchase properties at ridiculous undervalued rates." Each piece of evidence was carefully documented: bank transfers, loan agreements, property assessments. I assembled a case so meticulously that it would be impossible to dismiss. Meanwhile, I maintained a calm exterior with my parents. Short, polite conversations that revealed nothing of my true intentions. They believed I was still processing the loss of the family home, unaware of the storm brewing beneath my composed surface. My father, typically boastful about his supposed business acumen, didn't realize I was systematically dismantling his entire network of deception. Each conversation was a carefully choreographed dance, with me extracting information while revealing nothing. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: my father's former business partner, Robert. After years of being burned by my father's unreliable business practices, Robert was more than willing to provide testimony about the pattern of financial manipulation. "Your father never could resist a bad bet," Robert told me over a carefully arranged lunch meeting. "But this time he's gone too far." Robert provided crucial documentation showing how the casino owners had been systematically targeting families with gambling addictions, creating a predatory ecosystem of debt and property acquisition. By the 8th week, I had assembled a comprehensive dossier that was more than just a personal vendetta. This was evidence of a widespread criminal enterprise. My strategy wasn't just about recovering the house. It was about exposing an entire system of exploitation. I contacted an investigative journalist, Maria Rodriguez, who had a reputation for taking down corrupt local institutions. Her initial review of the documents confirmed what I had suspected. This was a story that could blow the entire operation wide open. "They've been doing this for years," Maria confirmed. "Preying on families, using gambling addiction as a weapon to strip people of their assets." The plan took shape with surgical precision. We would not just file a legal challenge to the house sale. We would create a comprehensive expose that would dismantle the entire network. My mother called periodically, her conversations increasingly nervous. They sensed something was coming but had no idea of the scale. "Are you okay, Michael?" she would ask, her voice tentative. "I'm fine," I would reply, my tone neutral. just handling some things. Each conversation was a carefully constructed facade, hiding the legal and investigative machinery I was setting in motion. The local authorities were brought in, not through an aggressive approach, but through a meticulously constructed case that they couldn't ignore. Financial Crimes Unit, Property Assessment Board, State Gambling Commission, each was provided with irrefutable evidence. By the 10th week, the first domino was about to fall. Marcus Reynolds, the real estate developer, had no idea that his entire network was about to be systematically exposed. The casino owners who had been profiting from this scheme were equally unaware. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind, "Protect what matters," not just with anger, but with intelligence. I wasn't just seeking revenge. I was seeking justice, not just for my family, but for every family that had been similarly exploited. The final pieces were falling into place. The investigative report was ready. The legal challenges were prepared. The authorities were briefed. All that remained was to set everything in motion. My phone rang. It was Laura from the Financial Crimes Unit. "We're ready," she said. I looked out my office window, watching the city move beneath me. "So am I replied. The game was about to change. Permanently. The next morning, everything exploded simultaneously. Like a perfectly synchronized military operation, every aspect of our meticulously planned strategy went into motion. Maria Rodriguez's investigative piece hit the front page of the local newspaper. The headline screamed, "Casino Empire built on fake East Chayan. Predatory practices exposed." Accompanying the article was a comprehensive breakdown of how the casino and real estate network had systematically targeted vulnerable families. Within hours, my phone started buzzing. First, Marcus Reynolds' lawyer called, desperate and panicked. Then the casino owners' representatives. Each call was a mixture of threats and bargaining, which I calmly deflected. "I'm not interested in negotiating," I said repeatedly. "Your actions will be fully investigated." The state's Financial Crimes Unit launched a full-scale investigation. Bank accounts were frozen. Properties were placed under temporary seizure. The network of corruption that had operated in broad daylight for years was suddenly exposed, vulnerable. My parents were summoned for questioning. The look of shock on their faces when they realized the depth of my investigation was something I would never forget. "How?" my father asked, his voice breaking. "How did you know?" I simply smiled. "I learned from the best," Grandma always said, "to protect what matters." The legal proceedings moved quickly. The house sale was immediately invalidated. Not only would our family home be returned, but the developers were forced to pay significant restitution. But this was about more than just our house. Dozens of other families came forward, empowered by the investigation. Families who had been silently suffering, stripped of their assets by the same predatory system. My mother's initial anger transformed into a strange mixture of shame and reluctant admiration. "You've always been different," she said during one of our conversations. "More like my mother than I ever was." The casino's operating license was suspended pending a comprehensive review. The real estate developer's entire portfolio came under intense scrutiny. Marcus Reynolds was arrested, his network of corruption systematically dismantled. My father's gambling addiction became a central part of the investigation. Rehabilitation became a condition of avoiding more serious legal consequences. 6 months after that initial phone call, our family home was not just returned, it was restored. I used part of the settlement to renovate the property, bringing it back to the condition my grandparents would have wanted. During the renovation, I found something remarkable. Hidden in my grandfather's old workshop, behind a loose floorboard, was a small journal. His notes about building the house, about family, about integrity. One passage struck me particularly. A family is not defined by its mistakes, but by how it rises above them. The local community began recognizing the broader impact of the investigation. Other families who had been similarly exploited found hope. The casino's practices were exposed, creating legal precedents that would protect vulnerable individuals. My relationship with my parents transformed. It wasn't perfect, but it was more honest. My father entered a comprehensive gambling rehabilitation program. My mother started volunteering with support groups for families dealing with addiction. A year later, I sat on the porch of our restored family home. The afternoon sun cast long shadows, reminiscent of those summer days from my childhood. My grandmother's legacy wasn't just the house. It was the lesson of resilience, of strategic thinking, of protecting what truly matters. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was seeking justice, not just for my family, but for every family that had been exploited by a system designed to prey on vulnerability. The phone rang. It was Laura from the Financial Crimes Unit. "We've got another case," she said. "Think you might be interested in helping." I looked out over the property my grandparents had built, the home my strategy had reclaimed. "Send me the details," I replied. Some stories don't end. They simply transform. And some family legacies are worth fighting for.